everybody, what's going on? Hillmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to kind of do a brief news roundup, as there is a ton of stuff that Riot have been publishing recently talking about all sorts of different things. So let's go ahead and jump right into it as sort of a summary of all of these things if you have missed any of them. First and foremost, let's talk about Riot's update on their behavioral systems overhaul, which is happening here in the last couple of months. Riot have talked about in July that they really wanted to focus on addressing disruptive behavior that happens in game, especially including intentionally feeding opponents, sabotaging teammates by griefing them, intentionally leaving the game, going idle, disconnecting. All that stuff are all things that Riot are trying to improve. Now, Riot have been able to make some progress, and they're sharing that with us in this article, first and foremost by saying that they will be improving their intentional feeding and idle AFK detection. Riot do say that they'll be able to identify these behaviors at double their current rate and take action against those behaviors more consistently, in addition to letting us know when we've actually helped them catch behaviors. So whenever you report somebody and you receive the little pop-up that says, "Congratulations, your report has led to a player being punished," those will be more common going forwards. Now, Riot have a three-part process that they're going to be using to try and prevent idle and AFK players from happening. The first part of this involves prevention in order to stop players from doing it in the first place, deterring the behavior from happening, and mitigating the impact of the behavior when it does occur. This means that Riot are looking into solutions to address AFKs in the short term, such as giving you early surrender options when there's an AFK super early in the game, or giving you LP mitigation for those in ranked games that have an AFK or intent to lose behaviors on their team during a loss. So that means that if someone on your team does disconnect after going 0-3 in lane immediately, or if they disconnect just in general, you'll probably lose less LP for it, and you'll be able to surrender a game much more quickly, which I'm a big fan of, because that means you're not just trapped in this losing game that you have no way to come back into. Riot are also trying to punish those that do it by having stricter queue lockouts for those that disconnect an AFK and pre-queue warnings for those that have disrupted games previously. That means that if you disconnect, it'll be a lot longer before you can actually re-queue up for a game, so disconnecting has more of a punishment tied to it. And pre-queue warnings will basically pop up and say, "Hey, you disconnected the last game, don't do it again." Now, obviously, if you plan on disconnecting anyways, there's not a lot that they can do about that, but hopefully these systems do allow for fewer AFKs in the first place, and a better experience for those who are on a game where you do have an AFK or someone idling or someone intentionally trying to lose. On top of this, Riot do talk a little bit more about champ select reporting. That has been in the game live on a couple of the servers for the last couple of months, and Riot are going to be keeping it on. At first, it was intended to just be a way for them to gather data and a way for them to check out and see how the feature's being used, but they've decided that they are going to leave them on going forward because it seems to be successful at giving players a preemptive way of avoiding verbal abuse in champ select and in-game. Now, the one problem area Riot did find with this was ban confirmation and detection. A lot of times players just sort of ban whatever they don't want to play against, even if their teammates are hovering that champion. And while Riot say, sure, we want to make sure you don't have to play against a champion that you really don't want to see, they also want to make sure that you're not banning a champion that one of your teammates wants to play. So Riot will be intending to make it clearer when you go to ban something that your ally wants to play, so that way you don't have a situation where you just kind of AFK ban Yasuo because you don't want to see him, and then your teammate's saying, dude, I wanted to play that guy. So hopefully that does address that, but I'm very excited to hear that champ select reporting will be sticking around. I haven't had cause to use it yet so far, but I can definitely see how this feature would be very useful. Moving on to the quick gameplay thoughts that have been published today by Meddler, which mostly focuses here on the Spirit Blossom event, which I think, as anyone will tell you, has been a huge success so far. There have been a ton of people playing in the event, and a ton of people have really been enjoying the Spirit Bonds system. So much so that Riot have basically said that they'll be adjusting future events to have more of what resonates with players. In this case, between game thematic systems. So while we probably won't get another dating sim for events going forward, there will be things to do in between games beyond just, oh, well, I have tokens, so maybe I can craft something with it. Some way of interacting thematically with the universe and with the event, even if it's not a dating sim. I can already see a couple of ways in which Riot could do this and have things for players to do in between games, but suffice it to say, so far, Spirit Bonds has been a big deal and a big success with a lot of players. Spirit Blossom has also had a giant effect on champion play rates. They published a graph actually in the same article showing how the champion breadth and depth graphs have changed over time during the event, and it's actually massive. Every single champion in Spirit Bonds has gotten a huge bump to both their depth Q percent and their breadth Q percent. Now, if you're not familiar with this terminology, depth is how many games players play on a specific champion, whereas breadth is how many players are playing that champion. So Kindred, for example, went from being a character that most people didn't really play and who didn't have a lot of people play many games on them, to a champion that tons of people are playing and that significantly gets a ton of games played on them by those players. So they've improved by a significant amount, and even all of the other champions such as Cassiopeia, Riven, and Ahri have all gotten huge bumps in their depth and breadth queue as well. Now, Yasuo has actually lost his depth percentage during the event, as he's the only one who this has changed for. But a big deal for this is because Yasuo players are likely playing other champions, because there are a lot more champions that they actually need to play for this event. And since everyone else wants to play Yasuo so much as well, the depth is necessarily going to go down, as he's a much more contested pick than normal. So that does explain that, but these champions are all being played significant amounts, which I think is interesting, and I do think this is really cool, especially for lower popularity champions like Cassiopeia and Kindred, who are now these really popular champions that a lot of people are playing for the Spirit Blossom event. Now, I do expect these numbers to fall down over time as more people kind of say, well, I've already played this champion a bunch over the event, so I'm not going to play them anymore afterwards. But it is nice to see that a lot more people are trying them and potentially sticking with them after the event concludes. Finally, a real quick mention of TFT Galaxies, which will be ending in just a little bit more than a month. Riot will be doing a bit of a breakdown after it ends, talking about lessons learned from Galaxies, how they're going to be changing the game in the future, and what's going to be up next for TFT. Now, Riot have said that the next set will probably not be sci-fi, but they will be doing sci-fi again someday in the future, maybe as they return to Galaxies, or maybe with a different tone and approach to sci-fi in general. However, they do say that there will be exploring a different theme coming up next, and they're very excited to see what our reactions will be, so that should be interesting. Meddler also went on to the League of Legends subreddit to talk about champions for skins, champions with skins who have been needing them for a long time, and saying that they've already targeted good skins for a range of champions who've gone a long time without one this year. Some of them have already come out. I can specifically think of Pool Party Talia, which was one of the more recent ones to come out this year, and a number more are still to come in the second half of the year. Riot will also be doing a review of some sort at the end of the year to talk with the player base about where we think they ended up this year, how well they did with getting skins to needy champions, and who they might have missed, and especially if they missed on any skin offerings. So in particular, I can think of Dunkmaster Ivern, which is a skin that no one really wanted, but that was Ivern's first skin post-release. So Riot will be in the future trying to say, hey, are there any skins that came out for needy champs this year that just completely missed the mark at the end of the year? So that should be fun. Moving on to an Ask Riot, which was published earlier this week. Riot talked about a couple of different things. Most primarily, though, they were talking about Winter Rift and other Summoner's Rift changes, as they did say that Winter Rift will not be happening this year. The biggest reason for that is because of the new Elemental Rift that happened this year, with changes happening to the map as a whole. They would have to do variations on a Winter Rift or an Arcade Rift or what have you for basically for each individual Elemental Rift. So Infernal Rift, Mountain Rift, Cloud Rift, they would all have to have some sort of change to them. So Riot really, it's not as simple as just turning on Winter Rift again this year, as they will have to do some modifications to it. Riot also used a lot of their bandwidth on the Temple of the Lily and the Lotus this year, which is the Nexus Blitz map, if you're unfamiliar with the name. So the bandwidth is sort of tapped out for map changes on this year, so we can't expect to see Winter Rift coming back this year. However, they did confirm that Nexus Blitz will be coming back more often as a part of events, which is very exciting if you're a big fan of the game mode, and I'm very happy to hear that Nexus Blitz will be returning a lot more often, as it has just been so much fun to play. Riot also went on to talk about their champion rework philosophy, specifically in regards to Mordekaiser, but they did talk holistically about how they decide what to change about specific champions, and how they approach reworking a champion who has been really struggling for a long period of time, who has basically no one playing them. Generally, Riot try to keep iconic abilities, ensure the strategic identity of the champion, and then create a thematic gameplay experience for the champion based on what you'd assume about them from their art and lore. Nunu, for example, was gonna keep Consume and Absolute Zero, his Q and his ultimate, because those two abilities were very iconic both to Nunu players and to just people in general. Everyone knows Absolute Zero. They know its name. They know it's Nunu's ultimate, even though they don't play Nunu. So that's an ability that definitely had to stay. And Consume, obviously, lots of Nunu players knew and loved. And so Riot knew they were going to keep those two, and then they decided to use the sort of whimsical nature of a boy playing around with his monster in order to create sort of a whimsical feel for Nunu and Willump, and that's the biggest reason why they came up with Biggest Snowball Ever, which is that big old W where he rolls the snowball at you, because it is a very whimsical, oh, boy and his Yeti, and they're rolling this big snowball around, and that's one of their biggest attacks. So that's, for example, how they approach Nunu. Mordekaiser, though, had very few abilities that needed to stay, which allowed Riot to come up with a new strategic identity that was going to match his thematics as well, which is this sort of Master of Death who's going to stride through the middle of combat completely indestructibly, single out one dude to murder him, and generally use magic to compensate for his lack of mobility as a big suit of armor. So generally, that's how they do approach reworks in the future. I've talked about it a little bit as well on my channel, of course, how Riot approach champion reworks and thematic reworks, but it's nice to see how they actually do it from the horse's mouth this time around, and to maybe look forward to how they'll be approaching future reworks, especially in regards to Dr. Mundo. Finally, in the same post, Riot went on to talk about which champions have gotten the most and least honors this season, which I did think was really interesting because, surprisingly enough, Yuumi gets the most honor per game in League of Legends, which I know a ton of people absolutely hate that champion, but she gets honored quite a bit, followed very closely by Soraka, Lulu, and Nami, which does make a lot of sense. Supportive champions are very oftentimes noticed for what they bring to the team and for keeping their teammates alive, so it does make sense that they get honored significantly more often. However, Riot did talk about a bunch of other champions that get lots of honor. Ivern is actually ranked number 5th. Of course, he is a supportive champion, so that makes sense. And Callista is ranked 14th, though it's probably because she has more direct synergies with her support due to her Oathsworn Bond getting more damage and bailing them out of a bad situation with Fate's Call. Riot also talked about a lot of the other champions that get high honor, which, especially for mid lane, usually goes to Galio or Orianna, whereas top lane honored champions go to Shen or Sion generally. However, they did mention that there's a lot of regional variance depending on how people honor champions. Yasuo, for example, is 108th globally in terms of honor, but he is actually 45th if you just regard European servers. So that was kind of interesting, as your mileage may vary depending on which champions you see get most honor. And it does say, hey, if you want a lot of honor, go ahead and play supportive champions like Yuumi or Soraka. You'll probably be swimming in honor afterwards. Finally, for you guys, real quick, Riot touched on the changes to Yone's walk animation. Now, a lot of players were giving feedback about Yone's walk animation. They were saying it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why this guy is just kind of walking around, trying to look badass at all times. Well, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Riot did say that they really wanted to give the feel for Yone that he's supposed to be calm, calculating, and precise in what he does, and he knows how strong he is. So he basically does the come at me walk because he knows he's stronger than you already, and he doesn't need to try very hard. The other problem with Riot changing Yone's walk animation is because all of a champion's animations are designed to move into and out of their walk animation just due to how the game is played. So there's a limit to how much Riot can actually do with a champion's walk. However, they did say that they're going to be making tweaks to the run animation to better match player expectations. He'll be leaning forward a little bit more and be a little less rigid, and make him look like he's ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. They'll also have him transition into his run animation when he hasn't been attacking for a few moments, so it makes him look a little bit more dynamic than just doing the casual come at me bro walk all of the time. This won't be going live. It won't be on the PBE, but it will be coming out when he hits live, so you can be looking forward to that. And that is going to be it for the news roundup today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know what you're most excited to hear about in the comment section below. I know I'm in particular excited to hear about how well received Nexus Blitz has been and how it will be coming back in the future, but whatever you guys think is most exciting, let me know down in the comments. This is a bit of a different video from what I normally do, so if you did enjoy this sort of news roundup approach, let me know that in the comments section as well. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later.